Well, good morning, everybody. I guess I'll get started. This is my first time, so give me some grace here as I attempt this one for the first time. And thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go by my trusty facilitator guidelines here and start off and say good morning. Erace is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person-to-person communication to show that we are committed to treating fellow human beings of all colors with love and respect. Join us. So for those of you who, I think there's only one person, and I think Ginger is the only person I've never met before online here. If I have, then I apologize. But I'm Michelle, and I am in Austin, Texas, and I was introduced to Erace by Louise, and I've been coming since about the summer of 2020, end of summer 2020, so a little over a year now. So I thought we could start out by going around and introducing everybody, and I'm going to, by my screen, I'm going to say Phyllis. Why don't you go first?
Morning, everybody. I'm Phyllis. I've been attending Erace since 2008 when I moved to New Orleans. And since it's Michelle's first time, I'm helping her this morning. So if I jump in, it's because I'm co-facilitating.
Beatrice?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm here in East Point, Georgia, having come in this direction after the breaking of the levees and Katrina. And I am co-founder of the Erace in Atlanta, and been going to Erace since probably 1994 when I was home in New Orleans. Glad to be here. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Well, good morning. I've been coming to Erace for about a couple of years now. I'm usually a snowbird in New Orleans, but the COVID has prevented that. So I'm in Boston. So I'm very pleased to be with you this morning.
Thank you. Bill?
I'm Bill Ives, and I've been coming to Erace for about 5 years now. Walterine and Dennis introduced us, and we miss their presence here. But I enjoy this meeting, look forward to it every week. Sorry I missed last week, but I had back surgery. But I learned something new every time.
Great. I'm glad you're here this time, Bill. So I hope you're feeling better and speedy recovery.
Thank you.
Marion?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Marion. I've been attending and participating in Erace discussions since it was founded in 1993. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to see everyone this morning.
Ginger?
Good morning. I'm Ginger Cashin, and I'm part of the Erace group that Beatrice and Larry co-founded in Atlanta. And I'm delighted that Beatrice has been sending out the links for today. And this is the first chance I've had to join the New Orleans group. So I'm delighted to be here.
Well, welcome. We're glad you've joined us. Lynn?
Good morning. I'm Lynn Frank from New Orleans. I've lived in New Orleans since 1970, but of course I'm not local. That doesn't count. But I love it here, and I'm certainly glad to have found the Erace group, which I have belonged to for around 2 years now. Good morning, everyone. Glad to see you.
Kate?
Good morning. I'm Kate. This is my first year with Erace. I'm coming to you from Florence, Kentucky. And I started, this is my first year with it. So thank you.
Nancy?
Good morning. I'm Nancy. I've been coming to Erace since June of 2007.
Thank you. Louise?
Hi, I've been coming to Erace for a couple of decades after Katrina moved to Austin. Sorry, almost forgot where I was. Beatrice, I love the way you say the breaking of the levees instead of just Katrina. So yeah, glad I'm here. Well, I'm sad that I'm not in New Orleans, but anyway, I'm glad I'm here in this place right now with y'all.
Cindy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Cindy Morse. I live in New Orleans. I realized just a few days ago I've been here 50 years. Now, of course, I'm a little older than that, but it's definitely home. I remember hearing about Erace when I was fairly new in New Orleans and never got here until the last 5 years. And so it's good. I appreciate your ideas and your friendship. Thank you.
Pedro? I like the window behind you today.
Yeah, I'm in a new location. I'm in North Carolina at the end of a long week of confidential behaviors with high school friends, and just really have enjoyed myself. And I've been coming to Erace for a little over a year, I think, and have thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to hear insights from everyone in the group and such. So look forward to today, and thank you for being the host of the meeting, Michelle.
Thank you for joining us. Marla. I can't hear you, Marla. I'm sorry.
I think it's the headphone thing, right? Does she not need the headphone? That happened to her last time.
Yeah,
No?
I know. Yeah. I'll come back to you, Marla. So if you want to continue to troubleshoot there. Let's move on to Glenn.
This is Glenn Abdullah from New Orleans, and I've been coming to Erace since 1994. And I'm happy to be here this morning.
Thank you, Glenn. Greer?
Good morning. My name is Greer Gilman. I've been coming to Erace since post the levees breaking. I like that, Beatrice, too, also. And I started, I think, around 2007. I love attending the meeting when we were able to do it in, but I don't mind it. I love the topic. Thank you.
Thank you. My mother, Francie, you get to go next.
Oh, hi. Well, you can see I haven't even set up. You can't see me hardly, but I guess I've been coming for approaching a year, and Michelle's my daughter, so I'm in Austin.
Thanks for coming. And I'm sorry, I don't know who the last person is, but joining us by phone. I don't have a name, and obviously
that's Marva.
That's Marva. Okay.
Her computer's updating, so.
Oh, okay. Do you want to introduce yourself, Marva? Well, hopefully she can hear us. Marla, do you think you have your problem solved? Do you want to? No, can't hear you still. I'm sorry. Can you hear us? You can hear us, obviously. Okay. Well, I think that's everybody I see on my screen. So I guess I will move forward here. And just re-explain the format of the meeting for anybody who needs the information. We ask everyone to keep themselves on mute or silence your cell phones that may be in the background. So when you're on the microphone, that's not a distraction. And then if you want to be put on the list to comment, you have 2 minutes. 2 minutes when you do, and you need to raise one finger to get on the list. And people speak in order of the list and have the 2 minutes, like I said. Please don't interrupt the speaker. There's no side comments to others or no personal attacks, no name calling. The point of the discussion is to listen, to learn, and not to argue or banter back and forth. Clarifying questions can be asked by anybody. There's a maximum of 2 clarifying questions per person who may be speaking. In order to ask a clarifying question, you hold up 2 fingers. And again, just try and get my attention by raising your fingers too. And you can, clarifying question has to be in the form of a question. What did you mean by, did you intend to say, it can't be a statement. If you'd like to make a statement about what the person may have been speaking to, then you need to get on the list and do that way. Let's see. And I will be try and be as tactful as possible to keep up with the rules of engagement here. So if I have to jump in and modify in that regard, it's just to simply to keep the meeting in the order that it's supposed to be. So no personal intended slights here. So then 15 minutes before the end of the meeting, there'll be a final wrap up in which everybody is allowed to go one last time. So people who did not choose to speak during the course of the meeting will have 2 minutes to talk. People who did will have 1 last minute to talk and give statements or whatever they want to say. And it's okay. You don't have to speak, obviously, if you would like to just listen the whole time. And I guess I am now going to give the reason I brought this topic so that we can move on to our discussion for the day. This topic is personal to me. I will say that one of my daughters, I have 3 daughters, and one of my daughters suffers from an eating disorder. And obviously, I'm white. So we are coming to that from a space of privilege and whiteness here. So, and from a place of having great health insurance because of my husband's job. So we obviously have the resources we need to help her fight this. And unfortunately, the eating disorder was not diagnosed until, she was a late teenager. And we're coming to find out, more and more about this. So it's a topic that I have some, authority by way of experiencing it in my family. So that's why I chose to bring it to this discussion, because as many things that we've discussed here since I've been a part of this group, the racism and the systemic racism of our culture has certainly impacts how other people face this disease. And so in the obvious ways in which we've discussed. So it's not recognized as much in the Black community. And then the treatment that people receive obviously is different. And if they even get to a point where they receive treatment for an eating disorder. And so before we start the discussion, I just thought I would throw out some of the statistics on eating disorders because in general, the ones that may not have been addressed in the article that I sent out for everybody to read. And these are from various websites. In 2018 to 2019, the U.S. had an estimated 4.39 million cases of women with eating disorders and 1.09 million cases of men. 9% of the U.S. population will have an eating disorder in their lifetime. 15% of women will experience an eating disorder at some point in their life. Eating disorders are among the deadliest mental illnesses there are, second only to opioid addiction, resulting in approximately 10,200 deaths per year. And of course, the pandemic has led to an increase in the prevalence and severity of eating disorders due to the anxiety and stress related to coping with the pandemic environment itself. In 2020, according to one website, there was a 66% increase in eating disorder hospital admissions. So with those grim facts, I'm going to open up the discussion, and who would like to get on the list? Marion. Anybody else at this point, or should I just let Marion start?
Marion's trying to start, but she's still muted.
Okay, I hit the button again. I didn't hit it hard enough. Okay, this brought back a memory from about 40 years ago. So I don't mind if you all think I'm 100 years old, that's okay. So this family member was always a close relative, very weight conscious female. And when she went for a medical checkup, and the doctor commented on how thin she was.
Beatrice.
So we were always a family of thin women. I'm not thin anymore because I love food. I don't believe I have an eating disorder, but this relative became so weight conscious that her mother said she thought she should go to the doctor and make some inquiries about it because she lost a lot of weight. So the conversation between her and the doctor led one thing to another, and the word anorexia came up, and the doctor said, "Oh, Black women can't be anorexic." And I found that horrifying because what does being Black have to do with you having an eating disorder? So to this day, this relative remains very thin. But when she told us about what the doctor said, I was really ticked off. And I wish I'd been there with her, because I don't want to smear everybody of a certain racial persuasion to say that, well, do other people think that Black women can't have eating disorders? I just thought that was very strange and rude and disrespectful to say because she was Black, she couldn't be anorexic. And she looked like a walking skeleton, to my way of thinking.
Thank you, Marion. I see Marva has a clarifying question.
Do you think that perception was due to Black people not having enough food to eat, and we were considered poor, and white people had an abundance of food and they chose not to consume it, and therefore it was a disease? Do you think that was the perception, that we didn't have enough to eat, so we wouldn't make a conscious choice to not consume food?
I don't think that's what the doctor meant. From the way she told us, I think there is this perception, and as I said a few minutes ago, I don't wish to smear everybody, but that Black women might have a body image concern, but we don't focus so much on being thin. And I think he was just being rude and disrespectful. I think maybe it had to do with his bias or his insensitivity, that a Black woman could be conscious of consuming not too much food, and therefore she was this very thin person. Insensitivity and rudeness, that's what I think it was.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Beatrice.
I was intrigued by learning or putting together the idea from this article, the intersectionality between race, body image, body size, healthcare, and eating disorders, just, all of that coming together. It was very disturbing as you look at it and look at the idea of the healthcare issues that African American people have. You would imagine that it would happen, that this issue of eating disorders would come together with, intersect with how we are treated. But I also have always been disturbed or concerned about the desire for thinness, and that there's a certain size of person that is acceptable and healthy, and no matter what race is. And I look at all of the commercials that we have advertising programs for losing weight, and I think about countries where people are starving, and then looking at the kinds of food that are available in certain neighborhoods. All of these things come together and make for a problem that is so almost insoluble. And you hope nothing is a problem that cannot be solved. But when I look at the, as I said in the beginning, the intersectionality between all of this, how do we work? How do we help it? How do we fix it? There were some solutions at the end of the article, but it is just another area that African-American people have to struggle and suffer through. And I find it unfortunate and disturbing.
Thank you, Beatrice. The list is to Marla. Sorry.
Hi, hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yay.
Woo pig. Anyway, good morning. So I too was highly disturbed by this article. Just as a nurse for the last 21 years, it gave me pause to think about my training and the training of physicians also around me, and the realization that it's been a realization I've had for a long time, but we have to do better in how people are brought into healthcare as healthcare professionals, and what studies and things are used to serve as examples. I mean, historically, studies that have been done, like clinical trials and that kind of thing, opportunity has been given to white folks, right? We haven't really spent a lot of time focusing on populations that are at high risk and in greatest need. And I think that's one place where all this has to start. And then I also, too, like Beatrice, thought about the intersectionality of everything. And just in general, how women, when we go to the doctor's office, that hyper focus on discussion about weight and BMI, and how BMI, was never meant to be an indicator of health ever. And that hyper focus on losing weight and falling into a certain BMI percentage, because if you become under 26%, you're phantasmagorically more healthy than somebody who's 27%. It doesn't make any sense. And I think it just leads to more and more issues with body dysmorphia and things like that, especially among women. That's all.
And Rebecca, did you have a clarifying question? You're muted. So no.
Did y'all put me on the list?
Michelle, did you see Glenn?
No,
I'd
I
like
did
to
not.
be-
Sorry, Glenn.
I'd like to be on the list. It was one finger, right?
I saw two, but I mean, somebody said two, so
I
but I
should've.
got two. Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so then Glenn would be next, and then I've got Rebecca on the list.
Okay. Now, in the 50s, a sign of health that you were, they would show an overweight child as a sign of health. There was a young man who lived about a block away from me. He was used in selling carnation cream, and they would show him this very overweight child, and they was, and the neighbors would say, "Oh, that's a little man there. That's a little man." They would be bragging about his overweight, a sign of health. And now, in the 60s, that Barbie doll came along, and that it didn't affect the African American neighborhood, but it affected the white neighborhood. And then on top of that came Twiggy as a model, and she was a twig. That's what she looked like, a twig. unattractive in the black neighborhood. That was unattractive to us, you know. No butt, no nothing, you know. So so I think most it affected white women, and it didn't affect my population. Now, as we become more brainwashed, there might be some among us that begin to look at their bodies and say, well, you know, I gotta look like this white person, and following the craziness of white people. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Glenn. Sorry, my phone dinged. It didn't mean to. That wasn't the timer, but anyway. Let's see. Next was Rebecca and Greer. Did you want to get on the list? Is that a clap or a hand?
That's a hand for up to get on the list.
Okay.
Hi, and can you
And
hear
Cindy?
me? Oh,
Yeah, I can hear you.
okay. Well, it's wonderful because every week you read an article and you learn something new. I do know that there's the issue of whether you want to be a heavy person or a light person or whether you care. But I think the mental health issue is a little bit more than just your size. I think it's some kind of terribly painful, emotionally painful anxiety. I don't know how to characterize it just from reading it. And it really, it needs treatment, or I think your life is in danger from it. I think that's true. And then that did say in the articles that the people with an eating disorder can be suicidal. So it's very sad. It's another thing. We need more mental health and more acceptance that mental health can actually help you in a situation like this. And I think that the Build Back Better bill may offer
Louise.
this. Check it. That's it.
Thank you. Let's see. I have Greer next on the list.
I've been a nurse for 24 years on tomorrow. And racism and healthcare intersect. We always talk about systemic racism, i.e. a hospital, healthcare, that's a system of being able to get access to things about your health. And what I find is that if people aren't an advocate, and it may not be in your nature to be an advocate, but if you want to advocate for yourself or whoever you're taking care of, then it makes it harder for you to get anything done. Because when you come to see a physician or whoever you're going to see, there are preconceived notions, and I've had that happen to me, and I've had to check a couple of doctors about it, and I never saw them again. But if a person doesn't have that wherewithal or fortitude to challenge, then you wind up getting substandard health care, but basically potentially dying. And I remember my mom, she got hurt at her job. So I came from my job to see her. And so the doctor was like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I basically told him, no, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. He looks at me and he's like, well, like, who the hell are you? And I looked at him and I said, I'm going to have one mother for the rest of my life. She fell and hit her head. And I said, she fell, she hit her head, and you don't want to do a CT scan. I said, just so you know, do what you're going to do here. I'm going to take her to another hospital. And she has a bleed at that hospital, you're no longer going to work again, and my name is going to be on the front of this hospital. Just so you know, she got everything she needed and more. And there was multiple times of that. So my thing is, if I wasn't a nurse, I'd have took my mother home, and she could have possibly died with a brain bleed. This is what people have to deal with who are not white in healthcare. Assumptions of lack of intelligence, assumptions of, hey, we don't need to do much for you. That's it.
Thank you. Has everybody been able to hear the timer?
Mhm.
Okay. Next is Cindy. You're muted still.
Cindy, unmute.
Can I get
It's
on the
hard
list?
to make it unmute. It did. Following Greer is always tough. I think a lot of what Greer said is right on, but I don't think it's only because of race. I
Gotcha,
think
Pedro.
many older people have the same problem in that they don't stand up for what they need or ask questions of a doctor. Unfortunately, growing up, as I did in the South, you don't question authority. And of course, doctors are one of the biggest authorities that's out there. That's not what I intended to say. The whole idea of body awareness and body difficulties, I think when we're, at least for me, and I grew up in a southern town, small town, middle-sized, middle class, the image of our bodies comes so much from the media, but the degree to which we let it determine how we behave is up to us. Hopefully, most of us know what makes us healthy, at least a minimal degree. And if we're aware enough to know what's good for us, we need to just do what makes us healthy, happy, active, and not worry about the images that other systems, other people are putting on us. The advertisers, all these skinny women, that's too bad. It's too bad for our culture. It's too bad for those women. And it's too bad for the young women, black and white, coming up who want to follow it. It's sad. But it doesn't have to condemn us to eating disorders. So where we get the confidence to stand up for ourselves, I heard it that time. Let me finish the sentence. A lot comes from our family, our surroundings, our relationships within our own small piece of the world. And hopefully we can build those positively. Enough said.
Thank you. Louise. Anybody else want to be on the list? Okay, thanks.
So, from what I've read in the article and from other articles and stuff that I've just picked up through the years, that in Black and brown communities, they're less willing to go to a mental health therapist or to participate in any kind of self-help groups, stigma attached perhaps to the community, whatever. And it was Glenn's comment that made me think about this, because he said that not in our community, we're not worried about this stuff. I mean, you just don't know, because I think a lot of people held it in and suffer with problems like this and don't get the help that they need. Perhaps that might be the case. Obviously, there's a body image, thanks to Lizzo and such like, that they're coming out to say that it's okay. Whether that's helping stuff, I don't know. I've never had a problem with my own body image, except for my big old belly that I've got right now, but I don't care, But I think that's helping, perhaps. And there's a lot more to it, which I can't speak of because I don't have that problem, and I don't know anyone that does. So I'm speaking from what I've read about, not from what I've experienced. That's it.
Thanks, Louise. Pedro, you're next. And after Pedro, there's nobody else on the list. So
Did you see Glenn?
Did Glenn? No, I'm sorry, I did not. Glenn's screen to me is just black.
He took
He
his.
comes on, he comes
Yeah.
on and he
Okay.
takes it off.
Pedro?
Yeah, okay. Hey, so thanks. So just FYI, I've been 35 years in the addiction field. I'm a licensed chemical dependency counselor since like 1985.
Phyllis?
And anyhow, there are some things about addiction in general that are similar, and then some that are dissimilar with eating disorders. The frequency and quantity is an indication that somebody may develop into a problem with drinking, for instance, or whatever. And I think it's important to point out that with eating disorders, you don't have the option of being abstinent from eating. You have to eat every day. And so it's a challenge of sorts that makes it kind of a unique addictive type of issue. But also just the issues of culture and psychic pain and those things, and the fact that when you look and you put the template or the intersectionality of race or maybe sexual preference, not sexual preference, but sexual orientation, excuse me, that when you feel you are more discriminated against, it creates psychic pain. And when you have psychic pain, whether it's drugs or whether it's food or whatever else, it sedates, it becomes, I think, more attractive. So addictions are multifactorial disorders. They include frequency and quantity, and the mode of administration for some drugs, of course, genetic predisposition, cultural influence and environmental influence. And under the cultural influences, women are more stereotypically categorized as thin as attractive type of thing. So they face, I think, greater, again, psychic pain that would maybe help explain the rates that are 2 times higher than for men. And then also, lastly, I would just say, well, I'll save my comments for later. Sounds like I just went over them in 2 minutes.
Thanks, Pedro. Glenn?
I don't have any statistics of African Americans who don't want to go see a psychiatrist. Yeah, I think most of them wouldn't want to go see. But I do know my culture, and my culture is not attracted to looking like a skeleton. The women are driven by
Nancy?
The women are driven by what the men in their culture wants. And now this eating disorder, I don't believe it was there in the 50s. And if it wasn't even 1% of the population. It wasn't even 1% of the population. No, it was scarce. It might have been somebody who was in Hollywood or somebody trying to had a modeling career. But among the average citizen, that was not the model that was put before them, looking like a skeleton. So everybody wants to fit in. You want to be in with the majority. That's natural. You want to be in with the majority. So if you're given an idea that the majority body is to be a thin body, then you may be driven to that. But that is not something by nature a person wants to do. That's just what is something that's artificially manufactured by business. That's it.
Thanks, Glenn. Next we have Phyllis.
And Marva's waving her finger. And
Okay,
Rebecca.
and Rebecca. Okay.
So what we're talking about in this article is not
Oops, stop. Sorry.
Fashion, sort of trying to follow fashion, as it were. or look like your Barbie doll or whatever. It's a mental health illness. They are eating disorders or mental health illnesses. And as far as I know, the human brain is the human brain. It doesn't matter what color the skin is, and everybody is subject to mental illness. The way it manifests in different cultures might be different, but everybody can be affected. How people respond to it is also culturally different. And, it is a problem if physicians don't have the cultural sensitivity and experience and humility to understand all of their patients. And for instance, here in New Orleans, a doctor has no excuse to not understand all the different populations here in New Orleans. They should figure that out. I had a young woman patient, the doctor, it wasn't one of the doctors I work with. I think he was a gynecologist, and she was doing this to her head while he was talking to her. And he started to look really concerned. and he said, "Is there something wrong with your head?" And she looked at me and I looked at her, and she said, "No, it just itches." And I understood that it's because the hair she had woven in was tight and it was itching her head. And he had no idea. And I was like, oh my God. So, and that's a minor thing because he's obviously not treating her head. But patients who go to see doctors, not all of them have the ability to advocate for themselves because they might not be very educated. They might not have like a understanding of how healthcare works. And I'll get back on the list.
Okay, I put you back on the list. Next we have Nancy.
Okay. A couple of things. I don't think women's body sizes are driven by likes or dislikes of men. Okay. Our body sizes are what they are. And sometimes you don't have, depending on your genetic makeup and genetic background, not everybody can control what size their bodies are. Some people are naturally thin, okay? Some people are naturally overweight, okay? When I was in the military, my friend and I, well, she became my friend, but we met in the military and we were same age. And she was overweight and she had to go to physical fitness training. As when you don't meet certain body standards in the military, you have to go to physical fitness. Okay, mandatory physical fitness to get you within military standards. She had to go to that because she stayed on the line of being overweight. And I felt terrible for her because she did not overeat. I mean, she ate healthy. She exercised. She ran 3 miles a day. She did everything that she needed to do, but she still struggled with her weight, where I could eat anything. I'm in there eating cheeseburgers and French fries and drinking soda and doing everything, granted, this was like 40 years ago or 40 plus years ago. And I didn't gain any weight. So it's not always a matter of what is in your control and in whether or not you choose or pick to be a size that you want to be. Also, to factor into the fact of what is available to you. Where do you live? And what food choices are available to you? Okay, you eat. If you don't have a car and you can't get to a grocery store that can provide healthy food choices, then you're going to eat what's available in your community. And that will affect your body size as well. I don't know how much time I have left. But there are a lot of factors that go into, it's not just a choice. It's not always a choice, and it's not always trying to please or entertain someone else.
You want to get back on the list, Nancy?
Maybe later, but right
Okay.
now.
You got me on the list?
I do have you on the list, Glenn.
Do you have me on the list?
No, I don't, Pedro. I will put you down. Sorry.
Bill has his hand up.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Bill. I was just about to say that. Okay. So the list right now is Marva, Rebecca, Greer, Phyllis, Glenn, Marla, Pedro, and Bill. Did I miss anybody?
Yeah, I was ahead of Phil.
You might need to close the list after Bill, looking at the time.
Yeah, it's 10:50. So Bill may be the last one. We'll see what happens. So next on the list is Marva.
You may remember this, Marion. In the late 70s and the mid 80s, Gloria Vanderbilt started a controversy with her beautiful jeans that was more on an order of dressy with the gold embroidered swan on the buttocks pocket. She made a statement that her jeans were made for women. She gave her reason as Black women had too big of a derriere, and her swan would ride a tidal wave if Black women wore her jeans. And that caused a big controversy. Media, news media, magazines, newspapers. I don't know if you all remember that. And I'm 75 years old. And how jeans was after I heard that, I never desired to buy her $100 jeans, $99.99. With the tax, it went over $100. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marva. Let's see. Next on the list is Rebecca.
I wanted to respond a little bit to Glenn, whom I really respect. And people did suffer mental illness, and it may have been about food or about something else in the 1950s, and they were put in hospitals. Perhaps you remember that. There were lots of large hospitals filled with people with mental health problems. And those hospitals were closed in our state, Massachusetts, by the governor. And the people went onto the street, some of them fortunately went home. And I think since then, we have more trained people to help people who suffer. It's something you suffer really acutely, mental illness. And it may relate to eating, since that's what we're talking about here, but it's real, and it was real in 1950, perhaps not quite so well understood, since we tended to lock people up who had that problem, but it was definitely there. So it's just because you would like to be another weight than the weight that you have doesn't mean you're mentally ill. I think it's kind of the other way around. You're mentally ill, and then there is some problem that shows that, and it may relate to food or drugs or many other things. And we really need more people now to help children in our schools and adults deal with their mental health problems. That's all.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next on the list is Greer.
I remember when Karen Carpenter died and everybody started talking about bulimia and anorexia. Then I remember there were like a lot of specials with stories about people who had eating disorders, and it was always a white woman. There was one, I think HBO did a series of different things, and this one young lady, she was trying to fit the mold that her mother had for. It was based on true story, where she was actually throwing up in Tupperware, faking that she was better, and she had it all packed in the back of her closet. And one day her mom went in there and she saw it. And what I noticed is whenever something becomes new, it's like it's a fad in terms of healthcare. It's like, okay, we're gonna save everybody who has bulimia or anorexia. Even the media goes along with it and it rides with it, then it dies off. And once it dies off, I mean, when's the last time we really heard anything in the media or anywhere else about eating disorders, whether it's from one extreme to another? But what's even more ironic is most psych medications, if you do get on them and you're able to see somebody and you have some type of eating disorder, they actually cause you to gain weight. So if you're having an issue with gaining weight, they're going to make you gain weight. And I also feel like some providers, due to their bias of just being individuals in the world, it's like, if I have a phobia of puppies, it's like, they give you that, like, get over it. I don't have a phobia of puppies, but I'm just saying, with our individual biases, if I'm looking at somebody who's afraid of puppies and I'm thinking, well, hey, it's a puppy. It's not going to do nothing to you. But in their mind, that's the most terrifying thing in the world. And in our Black community, it's also hard to find Black physicians in terms of mental health. And that's another thing why I think we generally don't go to seek mental health, because we can't find anybody who looks like, understand it from our aspect of living in America and what we go through. That's it.
Thanks, Greer. Phyllis.
Well, Greer, you just reminded me, through my Works EAP program a while ago, I was looking for a counselor, and every counselor that was listed was a Black woman, and mainly social workers doing therapy. And I ended up not choosing any of them. I just didn't see anybody for a while. And here are the reasons I didn't. One, I didn't think they should have to deal with me, a white woman, doing therapy. I didn't want to put that on them. Two, I wanted to leave space open for Black people who would want to see them. I am seeing a psychologist right now who is Black at Ochsner, but my last visit will be next week. And it's been specifically focused on a specific topic, not general stuff. But this kind of has raised a question for me. I wonder how often a white woman with an eating disorder gets recommended for mental health care, and a Black woman who's perceived to be heavy gets recommended for bariatric surgery. I would be curious to see the difference in those statistics. And if anybody doesn't know, bariatric surgery is like having your stomach reduced or whatever, or a gastric sleeve. And I know somebody's son who does these kind of surgeries, so maybe he would know. And I just want to go back to saying that patients who don't have a lot of experience in the health, in getting healthcare, they two ways, but not the only ways that sometimes they respond is, one, they just accept whatever's offered, or two, they decline whatever's offered. And there's middle grounds, of course, and that comes to just not understanding their own condition and how disease works. And this is very complicated, and I hear my time. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Phyllis. Glenn is next.
Okay. I'm hearing people saying, commenting on what I said, two people commenting on what I said, and of which I did not convey that. I'm not talking about total mental health. I was talking about this eating disorder. Not that they didn't have, in New Orleans, we had something called the third floor. When you went to the third floor, it was for mental problems. That was back in the 50s. We knew about the third floor. But I'm talking about this eating disorder is something new, and it's caused by the commercial world, folk giving models, and then young women looking at their bodies and thinking that their bodies is ugly, overweight, and they start vomiting up their food. So and when I said about the black man, the black man is not attracted to the twiggy type models, and that the black woman is not attracted to that model, because their men don't is not attracted to that. And not to say that we don't have women that are thin. That wasn't my point I was trying to make. I'm just saying is that they don't look in the mirror and say, well, yeah, I'm ugly. Because that ain't what the men on the street is telling them, who are gawking at their bodies. That's not what they're telling them. That they are overweight, and they don't look like Twiggy. They need to lose some weight. That's not the kind of bodies that we attract.
Thanks, Glenn. Let's see. Next on the list is Marla.
Michelle, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Was my mic hot before you had to cut me off or something?
I did that. Yeah, your mic was hot.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Marla.
Yep. Okay, first I just wanted to start by saying men also get eating disorders. By and large, it is female dominant disease, but there are still men out there who do experience tremendous body dysmorphia, and especially athletes. I know wrestlers, boxers, they have to cut weight. And the stigma that surrounds that type of behavior can often be very disordered thinking. So that's number one. Number two, just as kind of a side note, but not really, and I think somebody already said it, but men are not the determinants of how women feel about their bodies, right? Men don't decide that for women. Certainly there is influence, but it's not the primary reason why women feel the way they feel about their bodies. The next thing was, I've just started thinking more about colonization and decolonizing things like fitness. And I saw Phyllis put that link in the chat, which is awesome. Decolonizing fitness, decolonizing our plates. And when I think about racism and ways that whiteness is all around, right? And how whiteness is thought to be the most superior thing or the better thing as far as white food being healthier. And we think about how folks of color, their foods are often put down as unhealthy, which is just insane to me. It's outrageous. And it's just another area of tremendous colonization and that influence. There is a woman on Instagram. Her handle is black.nutritionist, and she is doing amazing things to decolonize plates and kind of showing Black folks not to feel, don't feel like you can't eat your culturally specific foods, that those are not unhealthy options. And I think healthcare workers are so guilty of saying, putting down cultural foods and telling people they have to eat plain chicken and plain vegetables, and it's simply not true. And the final thing is that there is health at all sizes, mental health, disorders, eating disorders aside, there is health at all sizes. There is not a healthy body versus an unhealthy body size, right?
I
And
see, Glenn.
movement is for all people who are able to move. And if you can move in any way at all, move in a way that feels good to you, right? And that's it. I'm done.
Thanks, Marla. Glenn has a clarifying question.
Yeah, well, what you think about the African American diet eating, what they call that stuff? What's the intestines of the pig? Chitlins. What do you think about that? You think that's a healthy diet?
I mean, I think that it's something that can be enjoyed, right? There's a place for it in a diet. If that's something that you enjoy eating, then yeah, I think there's a place for it. I struggle to not label foods as bad or good. That's something that I continue to work on, and I've worked on since I was a teenager. I mean, probably had my own issues with body dysmorphia over the years, for sure. And body image, body checking and all of those things that sometimes we do, as most frequently women do. But yeah, I think there's a place for chitlins. I mean, there's a place for all of it, on your plate. There's a place.
Thanks. Okay, let's see. Next, we've got two more people. It's 11:06. We've got Pedro, and then we've got Bill. So
I think Cindy has a clarifying question.
I'm sorry, did I miss you?
You're
No?
muted, Cindy. Oh, no.
Yeah. Okay. I think she says no. Okay. So then that means we can move on to Pedro. You're muted, Pedro.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I think putting this whole template of this discussion in the context of racism is important. There's a woman I've mentioned before, Arlene Geronimus, Dr. Geronimus, that was part of a group that did these studies on weatherizing, that if I'm an African-American, there's a greater chance I'm in poverty. There's greater stresses that I face throughout life, concerns about my family, diet, all of these things, food insecurity, et cetera, that at the end of the day, takes years off my life. And in fact, we know that life expectancy for African Americans is less than Anglos in our country. But also the stress that's created in environments in which there is more food insecurity, that, like I think Nancy mentioned earlier and today, about accessing good food and at a reasonable price is just not an option in many parts of our urban cities and places that disproportionately poor folks and African Americans as well reside. And I think also we know that diabetes, there's twice the rates in African Americans versus Anglos. We know, if I remember correctly, it's more of the bulimia rates that are higher in African Americans and Anglos. The anorexia nervosa seems to be fairly similar and such. So I do think that these environmental issues are really, really important, and absolutely cultural influences are really, really important as to what is more attractive or less attractive and such. So it's a very complicated mix of a lot of things, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, African Americans face greater hurdles than whites do. Thank you.
Thanks, Pedro. And then Bill is the last person on the list.
First of all, chitlins in some European cuisines are considered a delicacy. They're called sweetbreads, and they're a high cuisine. But That's an aside. This shows once again that racism impacts all aspects of our life. Every topic we cover, we find racist aspects to it. And this is just one more. The ideal body type is more culturally determined, although now medicine is weighing in on that. I mean, centuries ago, as they said in the article, heavy people were considered the ideal type because they were rich enough to afford rich food. And an overweight man was a lucky catch because he would be rich enough to support you in style. And now thin for some people is considered ideal. Personally, I do not find thin women attractive, whether they're 25 or 75. And that's just my personal preference, but I also, it's based on experience. I find that thin women are more cold and less warm. And that's my personal experience. I hate to stereotype this. And I had an ex-wife who lost 40 pounds and she became much less friendly as a result. And, but I also see a wide variety of body types in African-American women. There are many African-American women in New Orleans, of course, and there's thin, and voluptuous, and whatever. There's no single stereotype for African-American women or white women. Also want to pick up on the thing that food deserts and communities of color are less likely to provide access to healthy food. I heard the bell go off, so I'll stop now.
Thanks, Bill. Well, that's the end of the list, and it is 11:11, so we'll go ahead and go to the wrap up here. I have the list. The 4 people I noted that did not talk were Lynn, Kate, Ginger, and Francie. So I will start with the 4 of those and let them have their 2 minutes to speak if they would like to do so. So how about we start with Lynn? You're muted. Sorry.
Forgive me, Bill, as an old French teacher, I have to say that sweetbreads are not intestines. They are part of the thymus gland or part of the pancreas. But French people do eat tripe, and they're well loved, and they make their version of andouille is made out of tripe. And so that's one thing. The other thing that I wanted to say was the article, we didn't get to this point. The article said the beginnings of anti-fatness were anti-Blackness. And I don't know what people thought of that remark, that some social scientists noted that many Black women were heavier than white women, or Black people were heavier than their white counterparts, and they were healthier at heavier weights. And they said, if you want to distinguish white people from Black people, you have to have thinness, and being heavy is a sign of Blackness. And so that they called it fat phobia, but it was Black phobia too. So I don't know about that. And if you look on Wikipedia, they're talking about anorexia nervosa at the beginning of the 20th century. And so it was known, but it wasn't popularly known. I guess that's all I can say. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I have no personal knowledge of this subject, and I was glad if you did.
Thanks, Lynn. Let's see. How about Kate next?
I just wanted to say, when I think it's an economic thing. When I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, the focus was to get us fed, and to have food in the house. And so more than likely, they purchased the food that they could afford. And while everybody else was talking about nutrition, I think in the Black community, it was because of job availabilities and the pay that was the focus, just to keep people alive. And unfortunately, most of those would be like carbs and stuff like that, things that would actually put weight on you. Thank you. Enjoyed the discussion.
Thanks, Kate. Ginger.
Thank you. It's great being with all of you today. And I appreciated so much this article and the discussion, especially those of you who have firsthand experience, either medically or like in Pedro's case, working with people in recovery. I was struck by how the bias in it, the racism in the diagnosis of people with eating disorders, and then the long-term effects when they go undiagnosed, the long-term health effects of those people who have gone undiagnosed. So it's not treated early. And then they go on being ill and sicker. And so that really struck me. And of course, that is across the board, I think, in healthcare, the racism that exists and the detrimental outcomes for people of color because they go untreated. So thank you. And it was really great being with all of you today.
Thank you. And then last but not least, Francie, my mother.
Well, I wanted to somewhat agree with Glenn about girls and women being influenced by boys and men to some extent. And that's some women. I'm not saying that's a universal thing, but I do believe there are women who survive by paying attention to what men want and feel that that's part of their survival. On another note, I don't believe necessarily what we're learning in our family. I don't believe that eating disorders are necessarily a mental health issue of the individual who has the eating disorder. I think there is a family dynamic and a social dynamic that can play into it. And we're trying to learn what that is or how we can become a part of the solution to help my granddaughter. And we're finding that there also can be a biochemical component. And I'm also led to believe that part of that, because there's more eating disorders now, and one of the eating disorders that nobody, I believe, has mentioned is binge eating, which is, I hope Michelle doesn't mind, but that's kind of what we're dealing with, is gross overeating and indiscriminate overeating. And I wonder if the food industry's use of plastics, well, the whole world's use of plastics, and how those plastics can leach into food and become part of the food chain, have to do with a biochemical component. I have no idea really, but those are the only things I wanted to add just from our experience.
Thanks. And yeah, I was going to mention that later. So let's see, that's everybody who is not spoken. We will go around and get everybody who has spoken another minute. So I'm going to start with my screen here and work my way down. So I'm going to start with Greer.
Okay. I love the article. And another thing, I forgot who said it, but a lot of things have changed with how we eat and what we eat. There was a guy who had bought a house that was built like in the 1930s. He went to put modern day plates in it, and the plates couldn't fit because plates were much smaller back in the days. And with the change of what's put in food, they put corn syrup as a switch. Like I grew up eating sugar, but then they switched it to corn syrup, and they knew how detrimental corn syrup was to the body. And it's in so much food right now. I mean, corn syrup is even in meat. That's why I stopped drinking sodas. So the corn syrup was bad. They studied it on white bodies, but they knew it was going to be 2 times as detrimental to Black bodies. Everything is now either cheap or with fillers. If you're not basically buying organic and that sort of iffy, I mean, there's so many things, but that was one thing that we didn't really reach on, is how much the food has changed that we eat from now to where everything is just, I mean, from back then to now, everything is just basically processed. That's it.
Thanks, Greer. Let's see, Beatrice.
Interesting discussion, good article. I think concern with doctors being culturally sensitive. The Harvard study done very recently that found medical students who thought that Black people didn't feel pain because their skin was thicker. And so that when a Black person comes in complaining about pain, they may not be treated well. I think students need to be taught in elementary schools about what is really nutritionally sound, but also those nutritionally sound foods need to be available in their communities. There's a big grocery store chain here that is closed indefinitely because copper was stolen, and so the electrical system is off. And what that means is that whole store, which was a really, really stopped, is not available to people who have to use public transportation. To Glenn's point, I remember someone telling me, "Girl, don't lose too much weight. No brother don't want to hold on to a bone." So I mean, there is certainly some truth in that, and of course, it is not. Everybody doesn't feel that way about their bodies and does not determine what brothers want, but somebody did tell me that. And finally, look in the mirror. Are you healthy? Are you comfortable? Are you satisfied with yourself? And just feel good about yourself. How do you look? How do you feel? Great article, nice discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Beatrice. Rebecca.
Yeah, I think it was a great article, and I like all of the discussion. Everybody has something really important to say. My son is a surgeon at the Oxner, and he operates on very heavy people. Thank you, Phyllis. And I will ask him, by very heavy, it's 400, 500, 600 pounds. So it doesn't have anything to do with how you look. And people come for the operation because if they lost weight, they will live a little longer. So I'll talk to him about how many of those people, because that was my interest, that actually face mental health problems linked to their eating habits. And I'll ask how many people of color and how many white people, sort of in general. I don't know how much he'll tell me, because he might not be allowed to do it, but he certainly would be able to tell me if the people he's operating on, they also have mental health problems. That he would probably answer that one question, which was kind of my interest in this. So thanks to everybody. I mean, it's really interesting what you say. It's wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rebecca. Bill.
First of all, thanks, Lynn, for the correction. I knew that French people eat intestines, but had the wrong name for it. Again, this is, as I said, this is a great topic. And it's nice to introduce new topics, because every time we introduce a new topic or new area, we discover the important influence of racism on that area. So I appreciate it. And thanks everybody for the discussion. Look forward to next week.
Thanks, Bill. And then Marian.
During the discussion, I thought how timely this was. I thought about Thanksgiving next week and how those of us that live in New Orleans, most of us, I can't speak for everybody, look forward with anticipation to holidays such as Thanksgiving and Christmas, because we are going to have all this yummy, delicious food. I'm not cooking this Thanksgiving because I'm not going to be in town. In fact, I'll be out of the state going to my son's house in Arizona. But ironically, the whole time we've been sitting here discussing this, there's been the food section of our local newspaper staring at me. And would you believe, I don't know how this section got separated. It's a big chicken, sweet potato, something casserole. And I didn't want to get up during the discussion, and I couldn't stand it any longer. So I just moved it, I just picked it up and moved it over to the side. But it's a big discussion in the living section in anticipation of the holidays coming forward. Thank you, Michelle, for this discussion. I'm not going to deny I love food. I think our creator did not make a mistake when he made food a primary, vital, very significant part of our lives. And I'm not going to criticize anyone who says they love to eat. This was all very, in some instances, kind of disturbing to me because the mental health issue arose. And I hate to think that something that's very necessary to keep us alive can also contribute to causing us some difficulty in life. But I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and to let you all know how much I appreciated all of your comments during this discussion period, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Thanks, Marion. Nancy.
Interesting topic. Thank you, Michelle. I just want to say you did an excellent job with your initial facilitation.
Thank you.
Looking forward to you facilitating again. Okay.
Thank you. Louise.
Yeah, I second that. You did a great job, just like an old veteran there. I also want to echo what Bill said, that every subject, obviously we deal with racism, but you can pick any subject and there will be racism attached to it, and that is just so shocking that us with white skin, we don't know on a daily basis every aspect of life is affected by racism, systemic racism, and culinary racism comes up. I don't know if that's even a thing, but we were talking about food in an area, and I think we've discussed this as also at another meeting about how they put McDonald's and fast foods and just crap around Black neighborhoods, you know, and so they don't have access to good food. So culinary racism, I mean, it's absolutely everywhere. I wanted to comment on who just talked. Oh, there was something. Oh, my brain. Anyway, never mind. Great discussion, and happy Thanksgiving, y'all.
Thanks, Louise. Cindy. Is she still there?
With a friend, so she sends her apologies. She enjoyed the conversation.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Bill. Pedro?
Yeah, just a few things. Number one is, moderation is so important. Eating in order to live rather than living in order to eat, which I think is a commercialized type of influence that we have in a market-driven economy that I'm not real fond of. I also think that the nature of oppression, again, just to reiterate what other people are saying, that's what systemic racism is, institutionalized racism is. It permeates all of these different areas. There's more fast foods, there's more liquor stores, there's more quick loans, there's more food deserts. At the end of the day, when you eat food, high caloric food that may not be that healthy, it does satiate the hunger drive, and therefore it creates, I think, why folks may eat so poorly. All of those things, and I think at the end of the day, we can say, you know, you need to be responsible for your choices, but the choices are different. They're different for people that live in poverty and are challenged by these a multitude of intersectional forms of unfairness. Great discussion. Thank you all very much. I hope everyone enjoys their family and friends over the next week of Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Pedro. Phyllis.
So I just want to say the stuff that I grew up eating would curl your toes, and not in a good way. I mean, hamburger gravy on white bread. Dessert was sometimes Caro syrup poured over white bread toast. I mean, no, it's not good. I don't eat meat now. So I grew up eating, you know, meat and potatoes. I'm from the Midwest. I just want to say thanks, Michelle. You did do a great job. This is a great topic. I want to say women don't think about what men think about us or care about what men think about us as much as men like to think we do. So get over it, dudes. We don't care. Thanks.
Thanks, Phyllis. Glenn.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, reason some of the women here don't agree with what I say because they hardcore feminists.
Not ashamed.
That's why I'm going overseas and shout. Let me see.
Shop.
Oh yeah, far as you know, I was listening to NPR yesterday, and they brought out statistic on food deserts and whatnot. Say 90% of the groceries are bought at supermarkets, and these people who you saying are locked in, no, they go to the supermarket because they want to get the most for their money. They go to the supermarket and do their groceries. So that's what the person who took statistics on this. We not deprived of fresh vegetables or any other things like that because they go to the supermarket to get the most for their money. That's it.
Thank you, Glenn. Marva.
Congratulations, Michelle, on your debut. A good input and discussion, great article. I saw years back on the Japanese fast food from America. We always viewed Japanese as petite and small and not tall in stature. They have a weight problem in Japan, and McDonald's was mentioned in Burger King. Fast food, the Japanese people are enjoying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. I appreciate your comments. And last but not least, Marla.
It was a great article, and yes, great job facilitating. The only other thought I had left over was regarding the gastric bypass surgery and thinking about populations that I recall taking care of, which were primarily white women, recovering them from that type of surgery way back in the day, early on in my nursing career, and wondering a little bit about why that is, and realizing that's probably related directly to insurance and approval and cost as far as access. And you know, many folks of color have Medicaid, and trying to get Medicaid to approve a gastric bypass surgery versus somebody with commercial insurance. So again, the accessibility issue. And that's all I have. Hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Marla. Well, thank you again to everybody, and all your kindness you showed toward me this first time out as a facilitator. And as my mother pointed out in her comments, that yes, I was going to reveal that, a lot of people assume all white, if you're talking about eating disorders, especially around white women, it has to do with binge eating, bulimia, anorexia. And my daughter actually suffers from binge eating disorder. So she's heavy. She's fat, as the culture supposedly is now wanting people to call people that are overweight. It's not obese. It is actually fat. And I'm learning all about that. And so that was one of the resources that I put up with the article I had Phyllis, send out, was a link to a website for, as I think Marla mentioned in her comments as well, the movement towards health at every size. And so a lot of I'm learning about all the tenets of that. I'm currently reading a book by 2 different authors on the topic. And yes, one of the tenets of that movement is that no food is off limits. So again, speaking to the point of like making Black cuisine supposedly unhealthy, or saying those things about it, the movement is that, no food is off limits. Obviously, you need to learn to live in moderation of those foods, but nothing should be off limits. That's not what the point of this is about. Neither is weight loss, and how much influence we as a culture put on being thin. And that has just been detrimental to people's health, and that is very much a part of our culture, especially white culture, about losing weight. And again, something that people automatically assume, I think, as far as eating disorders are concerned. And I just also the information that there is a genetic component to eating disorders, and I have probably knowledge of that in my family, as my father-in-law, who is deceased, unfortunately, he was very heavily overweight. And as I look back on my 10-year relationship with him and his behaviors, I would not be surprised to find out that he actually had an undiagnosed eating disorder himself. So that could possibly be where my daughter is stemming part of her problem from. And I also want to just say, and Pedro's comments about the weatherizing and the Arlene Geronimo's research on that, and that another potential aspect of that is under weatherizing is the microaggressions that people of color face, and how much those actually do influence their overall health. I mean, they're subject to them on a daily, many times, multiple times a day basis, and that really does affect not only, your mental health, but then it leads to affecting your overall, body health, physical health. So, and then lastly, just the topic of social media that's available today, and the influence it has on our young people who are heavily influenced by it. And I know that is a very big component to my daughter's eating disorder, is that just like they are constantly on the phone, the computer, the tablet, whatever, and scrolling through things. I mean, I watch the behaviors of all of my daughters in that regard, and they are bombarded by all these images, all of this information, and it cannot help but affect their mental health and what they're seeing and what they are supposedly supposed to look like. And that is very, very worrisome to me as a parent, and I think it should be for any parent these days of young people under 30. How much that influences. So, but thank you again to everybody. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday with your families, if that's going to be. And then, Phyllis, we wanted to do announcements, I think is the last thing, correct?